You're watching Eye in Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim, and these are the headlines on the continent. Activists protest outside a UN headquarters in eastern DR Congo. It comes amid intensified militant attacks and growing anger at peacekeepers and authorities for failing to protect them. Over half of Zimbabwe's population faces starvation. According to the UN, continued food insecurity could sow the seeds for civil unrest. And the government of Benin expels the EU ambassador from the country over what it calls political interference. The EU has condemned what it calls a hasty decision. But first to DR Congo, where activists are sitting outside the UN mission in Goma, demanding justice for a fallen colleague. The man was killed in violence aimed at authorities and peacekeepers in Benin. A new wave of suspected militant attacks sparked days of protests in the eastern city. Crowds on Monday set fire to the mayor's office and stormed UN buildings, blaming them for not doing enough to protect them. 2 people were killed in the clashes. The UN mission in Congo, MONUSCO, says it's launched an investigation into the deaths. Well, police have updated the death toll from Wednesday's suspected militant attack from 19 to 27. A local official said the victims were hacked to death with machetes in a town some 30 kilometers from Benin. Since the start of the month, over 100 people have been killed. The vast majority of the deaths have been blamed on the Allied Democratic Forces, a militia that has terrorized the eastern province of Kivu since the 1990s. Shirley Sitbon has the details.
Every time a massacre is carried out in the North Kivu province, their name is cited.
The UN peacekeeping mission there reported that 19 people were killed in a new attack by suspected ADF elements early this morning in Maliki.
The ADF, or Allied Democratic Forces. Their leaders haven't claimed attacks, but the UN says they have killed hundreds of people in the past 5 years. The group, based in the forests near Benin, was created in the 1990s in Uganda. Pushed out in the late 1990s, the ADF re-established itself on the other side of the border. In 2014, the Congolese army intensified its operations to root it out. That's when attacks intensified. These images were filmed by France 24 reporters in 2016.
When you march, you should think of Allah. You should recite the prayer of the trigger. Do you know that prayer? Good. Recite it. If you say it well enough, you will know that God is with you and nothing bad can happen. Don't be afraid. Don't be alarmed when you fight against your enemy. Never back down. When you kill, don't think that it's you doing the killing. Allah is guiding you.
Since the Congolese army launched a new offensive on the group a month ago, attacks have escalated. Dozens of civilians have been killed. The local population has voiced despair over the Congolese army and the UN mission's lack of results, with many accusing Congolese soldiers and officials of collaborating with the militia. The UN force, though, says it has made progress. It says that it helped bring rest of regions in DRC from 1/3 of the country down to 10%.
Well, staying in eastern Congo, separate attacks have targeted 2 Ebola response centers, killing 4 and wounding 6 others. There's been no claim of responsibility so far. The country's second deadliest Ebola outbreak has claimed over 2,000 lives since last August. New cases had been dropping, but the World Health Organization warns security fears threaten to hamper efforts to contain the disease. Since the start of this year, attacks on Ebola health workers have killed 7 and injured over 70 people. Well, moving on now, and the United Nations Special Envoy Hilal Elver says over half of Zimbabwe's population faces starvation. The UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food ranked the country among the 4 top nations experiencing severe food shortages, and that's excluding those in conflict zones. Elver called it man-made starvation, pointing to Zimbabwe's poor harvest and 500% inflation rate. An estimated 8 million people are expected to experience food insecurity by the end of the year. She warned that it could also heighten the risks of civil unrest. Well, we can now talk to Hilal Elva. She joins us live in the program from Harare. Thank you very much for talking to us today. Now, you were touring the country for 11 days and said you've witnessed devastating consequences. Can you tell us what you saw on the ground?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for the program. It is an opportunity for me to a little bit explaining to the international community what is going on right now in Zimbabwe. First of all, basic public services are very difficult. There is electricity, almost half, more than 16 hours, no electricity. Running waters are very limited, and food insecurity is significant because of the drought, because of the not being able to import maize from outside, because of the financial crisis, and on top of it, country is having a really kind of questioning that how they will go out from this dire situation. Hospitals are not functioning very well. You name it, also, some of these issues that I saw, and the government is trying very hard, international community is trying, but I think they need to scale up both or all players to stop this human misery.
What has been the Zimbabwean government's response to this report and just to the situation in general?
Yes, it's actually they receive the report quite well, and they understand the situation. They are very much aware of it. And they found that's a kind of maybe helpful for them to explain to the international community that they are in the situation right now. They need immediate help. As you know, there is also sanction going on against Zimbabwe from the United States, UN, and United States, European Union, and UK. And maybe that will be a kind of turning point for the government to ease the sanction, to get a little bit better and more significant help from outside.
And of course, the Zimbabwean government is likely to bring up the fact that it's suffering under sanctions. How have sanctions in particular had an impact on the current situation?
Sanctions certainly has an impact in the current situation. The sanction is not a blanket one, which means more targeted sanctions. EU sanction is less comprehensive than the United States, but indirect impact is very important because any international humanitarian aid goes through the NGOs rather than going to governments. That makes the kind of aid is much more cumbersome, and they cannot really get credit from World Bank and IMF because they have earlier debt problems with these institutions, and at the same time, current sanction makes the banking transaction is very difficult. There is a significant cash shortages right now, significant foreign exchange shortages, so that's why they can't easily import necessary food for the people that they are vulnerable situation right now. So that's a very serious issue that I think they are very much aware of it, and they are trying hard, but they need also help because this is not the very recent. Last 20 years they were suffering that kind of isolation. more isolation than actually sanction, because the sanction makes the isolated the country. If they make some democratic reforms, that would be helpful, of course. They have to step up as much as the other side.
Okay, Hilal Elva, thank you very much for being with us on Eye on Africa today. That's Hilal Elva speaking to France 24, the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. Well, let's turn now to Benin, where the government has expelled the EU ambassador from the country over what it says is political interference. Oliver Nette is accused of violating professional rules of conduct for reportedly meeting with members of the opposition. The EU, meanwhile, condemned what it called a hasty decision. Clément Bonnereau has the details.
Further clarification from Benin's government 24 hours after ordering the EU ambassador to leave the country.
We regret that bilateral relations between the EU and Benin have been disturbed by the activities of this diplomat, who indulges in activities that we may consider subversive for our country.
Benin's government has accused Oliver Nette, in office since May 2018, of violating professional rules of conduct and, quote, interfering in Benin's domestic affairs. It did not provide further details. According to media reports, Nette recently met with members of the opposition, including allies of former President Thomas Boniyayi. None of the politicians cited have confirmed this. The EU, meanwhile, condemned what it said was a surprising decision by Beninese authorities.
For the EU, nothing can justify such a measure in the overall good relations which existed to date between the EU and Benin. We have therefore requested urgent clarification from our Beninese partners on the specific reasons for their decision.
Benin's government has given Oliver Nette until the 1st of December to leave the country. It's the first time Benin has expelled an ambassador.
And finally, Ghana is celebrating its year of return by granting citizenship to 126 long-time residents from the diaspora. The country is marking 300 years since the first African slave was sold in a slave market in America. Ghana was once a major hub during the transatlantic slave trade and declared 2019 as the year of return for Ghanaians living abroad. At the ceremony on Wednesday evening, President Nana Akufo-Addo told the new citizens that they were responsible for preserving and promoting the image of the country. Some very happy faces there. Well, that's it from us here on Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up. Stay tuned.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.